Welcome back. We're answering questions now from you, our viewers. If you have a question, visit our website, QuranSpeaks.com. Dr. Shabir, the question is, some people argue humans invented religion to feel safe. How do we know Islam is really from God and not just a human creation?
Yeah, so the idea that people invented religion because they wanted to feel safe, that is not a sufficient reason for discounting religion altogether. Because, we cannot argue with what is called a genetic fallacy. We cannot say that because we know where the idea came from, therefore the idea is wrong. Even if the idea came from an incorrect source or unreliable source, nevertheless, the idea itself may be correct.
So we still have to assess it on its own merits.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have to assess this idea that there is a God, and of course, the idea that there is a God, regardless of for whatever reasons people have devised for believing in God, whether they feel safe or they feel good, and of course, religion does make people feel good. But let's leave that aside and ask: do we have good reasons for believing that God exists? Yes. The very existence of the universe calls for an explanation, and the best explanation for it is that God exists. The design that we notice in the universe, going back to the very fundamental forces of nature, for example, the weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, these all call for an explanation. The strength of gravity requires an explanation. Why is it precisely that measure? Because if it was too stronger than it is, the universe would collapse on itself. If it's weaker than it is, the universe would fizz out, and the stars and planets would not exist. We would not exist. So why is it that precise measure that doesn't vary even by a hair's breadth from the ideal? That calls for an explanation, and the best explanation for that is that God created it. What about our moral sense? The idea that there are good things and bad things, and we can't confuse the two. Sometimes we might be confused as to which is which, but we know that we cannot mix the two categories and pretend that they are one, that all things are good or all things are bad. Yeah, there are good things and bad things, even if we disagree sometimes about which are the good things and which are the bad things. So the fact that we have this categorization in our minds, this sense of morality, that calls for an explanation. And it's not in the atoms that made us or that constitute us. It has to be in God, who is the source of all things good and who imbued us with that sense of goodness. What about the Quran as a revelation from God? The Quran bears the marks of divine inspiration. We can argue that in more detail, but in sum, for Muslims, the Quran is the word of God, and this itself is a proof that God exists. And finally, we can say that the belief that God exists, this is innate. It's not that people invented it for a certain reason. People have relied on it for good reasons. Like if they're in fear, they rely back on the idea, okay, so God exists and God is going to take care of me. But the idea that God exists is not invented, as a kind of a imaginary thing just to deal with the fact of the fear. If a lion was chasing a primitive man, or maybe whatever, some other creature or some other predator, then the primitive man is not going to say, okay, let me dream up the idea of God here so that I can escape this lion. No, because you're not going to escape the lion. But the primitive man already believing in the existence of God, at that moment may call upon God for his help in that difficult situation. So the belief in God is already there. It is already innate in human beings. And we should ask, why should I give up something that is innate, that we already know to be a fact, just without thinking about it? Why should we give that up for no reason at all? It is the other people who say, no, God does not exist and religion makes no sense. It is for them to prove to us that we should give up that innate belief. Otherwise, we on the principle of belief conservation, we should hold on to that innate belief. As for Islam itself, the fact of the Quran, as I mentioned, is a proof enough for Muslims, not only that God exists, but also that Islam is a true faith from God.
Beautifully put. We need to have more conversations, especially about atheist critiques of Islam and religion, because I think you have a lot to offer there.
Well, inshallah, I'll try.
Thank you, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.
Assalamu
Assalamu
alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Media Hub, the new home of Let the Quran Speak.
Here we spread positivity and good. We help people experience the beauty of Islam and help them appreciate and understand Muslims.
This beautiful building we purchased at cost $2.3 million.
Yeah, we've already raised a third of that money, and with your help, inshallah, we can pay off the rest.
So we're looking for people who can give $1,000 each. If you can be part of the select group, that's amazing.
Otherwise, just please give whatever you can. Every dollar counts.
It's our collective responsibility to share the message of Islam with our fellow human beings. Please help us continue this good work.
It's a sadaqah jariyah, something that will continue to be a benefit to the Muslim community long after Safiya and I are gone.
Please support our work at muslimmediahub.com.
Your support is zakat eligible and tax deductible.
May Allah bless you and your loved ones today and always. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.